Emperor Gornithax sat in his damaged command center staring at the reports flowing in from every ship in his fleet. The alien emperor had built his entire reputation on military conquest and had never imagined that he would face a situation where retreat was the only option for survival. His golden armor now seemed like a mockery of his former power as he struggled to accept the reality of complete defeat. The damage to his flagship was surgical and precise, leaving him alive but completely helpless. The humans had demonstrated that they could have killed him easily but had chosen mercy instead. The alien emperor realized that he was facing a species that possessed both overwhelming power and moral restraint, a combination that his empire had never encountered before. General Thrakos stood beside his emperor, reviewing tactical assessments that painted an increasingly hopeless picture. Every military analyst aboard the flagship had reached the same conclusion: the Vorthak fleet was completely outmatched and continued resistance would result in total annihilation. The alien general had never experienced defeat and struggled to find words to describe their situation. The Vorthak military advisors argued among themselves, with some calling for a final desperate attack while others demanded immediate surrender. The aliens who favored continued fighting spoke of honor and glory, while those who supported retreat focused on survival and the preservation of their remaining forces. The debate grew heated as the deadline approached. Captain Eugen listened to the alien communications and could hear the fear in their voices as they realized that their military superiority had been an illusion. The Vorthak had spent centuries conquering weaker species and had never developed the tactical skills necessary to fight against equals. The aliens were learning that real warfare required more than impressive ships and ceremonial formations. The alien fleet began showing signs of panic as individual ship commanders started making their own decisions about whether to continue fighting. Some Vorthak vessels began powering down their weapons while others maintained aggressive postures. The lack of unified command was creating chaos within the alien formation as different commanders reached different conclusions. Emperor Gornithax finally made his decision and transmitted orders for a strategic withdrawal to all ships in his fleet. The alien emperor tried to maintain his dignity by describing the retreat as a tactical repositioning rather than a defeat, but everyone listening understood the reality of what was happening. The mighty Vorthak Empire was fleeing from a species they had expected to conquer easily. The Vorthak fleet began a hasty withdrawal, with their ceremonial formations dissolving into chaotic flight patterns. Ships that had approached Earth with arrogant confidence now fled in terror as their crews frantically calculated jump coordinates to escape human space. The aliens transmitted desperate messages about technical malfunctions and urgent recalls to explain their sudden departure. Admiral Taman watched the alien retreat from his command center and made the decision to allow the Vorthak fleet to escape without further attack. The humans could have easily destroyed every alien vessel, but mercy was often more effective than massacre. When establishing diplomatic relationships, the fleeing aliens would carry news of human capabilities throughout the galaxy. The human fleet maintained their positions until the last Vorthak ship had disappeared into hyperspace. Then began the process of returning to their disguised configurations. The false hull plating slid back into place over the weapon arrays and energy signatures dropped to civilian levels. The humans resumed their peaceful appearance while remaining ready for any future threats. Captain Su-Yung received the first of many communication requests from alien species that had been monitoring the confrontation. The news of the Vorthak retreat was spreading rapidly through galactic communication networks, and other civilizations were eager to establish contact with the species that had defeated the seemingly invincible empire. The political landscape of the galaxy began shifting as various species reevaluated their assumptions about human capabilities. Civilizations that had previously ignored humanity suddenly sought diplomatic relations, while others began making territorial concessions to avoid potential conflicts. The balance of power was changing as the galaxy learned about human military strength. Lieutenant Commander Biora monitored the flood of messages arriving from across the galaxy and noted how quickly the story of the human victory was spreading. Some alien species expressed admiration for human restraint, while others demanded detailed information about human Military technology, the galaxy was buzzing with speculation about what other surprises humanity might have in store. The Vorthok Empire began experiencing internal problems as news of their defeat reached their homeworlds. Subject species that had been oppressed for generations suddenly began asserting their independence, knowing that Vorthok military power was no longer absolute. The empire that had seemed invincible was now facing rebellions on dozens of worlds. Emperor Gornathax struggled to maintain control over his crumbling empire as reports arrived of uprisings and defections throughout Vorthok space. The alien emperor had built his power on a reputation of invincibility that had been shattered by his encounter with humanity. The political structure of his empire was collapsing as subject species realized that resistance was possible. General Thrakos found himself facing court-martial proceedings as the Vorthok military leadership sought someone to blame for their humiliating defeat. The alien general had followed standard procedures and tactics that had worked for centuries, but had encountered an enemy that was prepared for everything his forces could do. The galaxy was learning that military doctrine had to evolve to face new threats. The human victory demonstrated that peaceful appearance did not mean peaceful capability, and that the most dangerous opponents were often those who appeared harmless until threatened. The story of humanity's emergence as a galactic power was becoming legend as other species realized that appearances could be deceiving and that underestimation was often fatal. Captain Daheim resumed his patrol duties, but noticed that alien vessels now gave human ships a wide berth of respectful distance. The false reputation of human weakness had been replaced by genuine recognition of human strength. Pirates and raiders who had once targeted human cargo vessels now sought easier prey among species that had not demonstrated such overwhelming defensive capabilities. The Galactic community was adjusting to the new reality of human power. While humanity continued to maintain their preference for peaceful solutions, the humans had proven that they could fight when necessary but preferred to use diplomacy and mutual respect to resolve conflicts. The galaxy was learning that true strength came from the wisdom to know when to fight and when to show mercy. The retreat of the Vorthok fleet marked the beginning of a new era in galactic politics as species throughout the galaxy realized that the old assumptions about power and conquest were no longer valid. The humans had demonstrated that a species could be both powerful and peaceful, setting an example that other civilizations would study for generations to come. The galaxy had indeed trembled when aliens learned that human warships were ready for war, but more importantly, it had learned that humans were ready for peace. When treated with respect and dignity, the balance between strength and restraint had established humanity's place among the stars and ensured that future encounters would be conducted with mutual respect rather than threats of conquest. The moment of truth arrived when the Vorthok ultimatum timer reached 0. Emperor Gornathax himself appeared on communication screens. Throughout the human fleet, his image projected with the kind of ceremonial grandeur that the aliens believed would intimidate their enemies. His golden armor gleamed under the bright lights of his throne room, and his voice carried the arrogant confidence of someone who had never experienced defeat. The alien emperor spoke in the condescending tone that had become his trademark during previous conquests, explaining to the humans how quickly his forces could reduce their civilization to burning ruins if they chose to resist. He described the fate of other species that had been foolish enough to oppose Vorthok expansion and painted vivid pictures of the destruction that would follow any attempt at defiance. Gornathax expected the humans to respond with desperate pleas for mercy or frantic attempts to negotiate better terms of submission. The alien leader had seen this pattern dozens of times before, as proud civilizations crumbled when faced with the reality of Vorthok military superiority. He waited for the inevitable begging to begin, while his officers prepared to accept the human surrender. Instead, Admiral Taman appeared on the communication screen with an expression of calm professionalism that surprised the watching aliens. The human admiral thanked the Vorthok for their patience and explained that humanity had carefully considered their options during the time they had been given to make their decision. His tone was measured and respectful, but showed no signs of fear or desperation. The admiral continued speaking in the same steady voice, explaining that Humanity had concluded they would prefer to maintain their independence and continue governing themselves according to their own laws and customs. He acknowledged that this decision might lead to conflict, but stated that humans were prepared to defend their freedom if necessary. The aliens listening to this response began laughing at what they perceived as suicidal defiance. The laughter stopped abruptly when Admiral Tamin gave a simple command to all human vessels in the area. The single word transmitted on encrypted channels throughout the fleet was "Drop, Captain." Daehyun repeated the order on his bridge, and across the human fleet false hull plating began retracting to reveal the massive weapon arrays that had been hidden beneath the transformation. Was breathtaking and terrifying, as ships that had appeared to be simple cargo haulers suddenly bristled with enough firepower to crack planets. Energy signatures that had been carefully suppressed for months suddenly blazed to life as fusion reactors powered up to full combat levels the space around Earth filled with the deadly glow of weapons that had been designed to fight wars on a galactic scale. Lieutenant Commander Biora initiated the tactical display system, broadcasting detailed information about human military capabilities directly to the Vorthak fleet. The aliens watched in growing horror as their sensors registered energy readings that seemed impossible for such relatively small vessels. Each human ship was revealing firepower that exceeded an entire Vorthak battle group. The Vorthak officers stared at their instrument readings in disbelief as the numbers continued climbing beyond anything they had thought possible. The humans had somehow managed to pack the destructive capability of a major space station into vessels that appeared to be no larger than civilian transports. The aliens realized they had been completely deceived about the true nature of human technology. Captain Yujin watched the expressions of the Vorthak delegation aboard her ship change from arrogant confidence to shocked confusion to growing fear. The aliens had spent weeks studying her vessel and had concluded it was primitive and harmless. Now they were discovering that the primitive appearance had been carefully designed to hide weapon systems that could vaporize their entire fleet. The human ships began moving with military precision that made the ceremonial Vorthak formations look like amateur theater performances. Years of training and preparation showed as human vessels took positions that maximized their tactical advantages while minimizing potential alien response options. The aliens watched their strategic superiority evaporate as they realized they had been surrounded by overwhelming force. General Frakos frantically reviewed his battle plans while trying to understand how his intelligence had been so completely wrong. The humans had not simply hidden a few weapons, they had concealed an entire military infrastructure that appeared to be decades ahead of anything the Vorthak possessed. The alien general realized he was facing an enemy that understood warfare far better than his own people. Emperor Gornathax demanded explanations from his advisors, who could only stammer confused responses about sensor malfunctions and impossible readings. The alien emperor had built his reputation on his ability to identify and exploit enemy weaknesses, but he was discovering that every assumption he had made about humanity had been catastrophically incorrect. The human fleet completed their deployment with movements that demonstrated tactical sophistication that the aliens had never encountered before. Each ship took a position that provided overlapping fields of fire while maintaining defensive formations that protected against counterattack. The Vorthak found themselves facing an enemy that had clearly studied their tactics and developed countermeasures for every possible response. Commander J1 opened a communication channel to the alien fleet and spoke in the same calm, professional tone that Admiral Tamin had used. His message was simple and direct, offering the Vorthak a choice between peaceful withdrawal and experiencing the full capabilities of human military technology. The human commander made it clear that the aliens were outgunned and outmaneuvered, but could still leave with their lives. The alien fleet fell silent as the reality of their situation became clear to every crew member aboard every ship. The Vorthak had approached this encounter expecting to add another easy conquest to their empire. Instead, they had discovered a species that had been preparing for galactic warfare while maintaining a facade of peaceful weakness. Captain Hyjin reviewed the tactical situation and noted how completely the tables had turned in just a few minutes. The aliens who had arrived with such confidence were now facing weapons that could destroy their entire fleet before they could mount any effective response. The humans had achieved total tactical superiority through careful preparation and strategic deception. The revelation was complete, and the galaxy was about to witness the first time in centuries that the Vorthic Empire had encountered an enemy they could not defeat. The aliens were learning that peaceful appearance did not mean peaceful capability, and that the most dangerous opponents were often those who appeared harmless until they chose to reveal their true strength. The human fleet waited patiently for the Vorthic response while maintaining weapons lock on every alien vessel. The message was clear: humanity was ready for war, but preferred peace if the aliens were wise enough to accept it. The choice now belonged to an empire that had never before been forced to choose between conquest and survival. Commander Daehyun stood quietly on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the massive alien fleet approach through the large viewport. The ships were beautiful and shiny, with smooth curves and bright metal surfaces that reflected the light from nearby stars. The Vorthic Empire had sent their most impressive diplomatic vessels to meet humanity for the first time. These aliens believed they were about to encounter another peaceful species, just like the many civilizations they had already taken over and added to their growing empire. The alien ships moved slowly and gracefully through space, like dancers performing an elegant show. Their hulls were decorated with intricate patterns and symbols that told stories of their past victories. Each vessel was at least 3 times larger than the human ship, but somehow they looked more like floating palaces than military warships. The Vorthak had designed these ships to impress and intimidate rather than to fight real battles. Captain Hyjin smiled as she looked over the diplomatic protocols that had been prepared for this historic meeting. The Vorthak had spent many months studying human broadcasts and transmissions. They had watched human entertainment shows and news reports about peace treaties and cultural exchanges between different nations. They had seen humans celebrating art festivals and sports competitions, but they had never witnessed any signs of military preparation or warfare. What the aliens did not know was that every human vessel, even those clearly marked as research ships or cargo haulers, carried enough hidden firepower to destroy a small moon. The humans had learned long ago that in a dangerous universe filled with hostile species, even their school buses needed to be able to defend themselves. The galaxy was not a safe place for the weak or unprepared. Admiral Taemin observed everything from the command center. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, his control room was surrounded by hundreds of screens showing different views of the alien fleet approaching their solar system. The Vorthak had brought exactly what humanity had expected to see: beautiful ships with very few visible weapons, designed more for showing off than for actual combat. Their energy scans revealed power signatures that were barely stronger than human civilian transport vessels. The aliens had grown soft and comfortable during their many centuries of easy conquests. They had never encountered a species that could fight back effectively against their forces. Most civilizations they met either surrendered immediately upon seeing their impressive fleet or put up such weak resistance that victory was guaranteed within hours. The Vorthak had forgotten what it meant to face a real military threat. The alien delegation sent their standard greeting message, which was transmitted to every human communication station across the solar system. Their translator, a proud being named Kel'Thuzur, spoke in a voice filled with authority and confidence. He explained how the mighty Vorthak Empire would graciously allow humanity to join their collection of subject species. The price would be regular tribute payments and complete submission to Vorthik Authoritek Elther. Described their invincible fleet and how resistance against such overwhelming power was completely futile. He spoke of the dozens of worlds they had conquered, and how no species had ever successfully opposed their expansion. The aliens seemed to enjoy explaining these details, believing that fear would make the humans more cooperative and willing to accept their fate. The humans listened politely to every word, nodding at appropriate moments and asking what seemed like innocent questions about Vorthik technology and military capabilities. The alien delegates were happy to answer these questions, seeing them as signs of human curiosity and acceptance rather than intelligence gathering. They never suspected that every word they spoke was being carefully recorded and analyzed. Young Lieutenant Minho sat at his monitoring station, recording everything the Vorthek revealed about their military strengths and weaknesses. Their energy shields operated on very predictable frequencies that could be easily disrupted. Their weapon systems had obvious blind spots that left them vulnerable to attacks from certain angles. Their battle tactics relied entirely on overwhelming weaker opponents with superior numbers rather than using clever strategies. The aliens were so confident in their natural superiority that they openly discussed their military capabilities during what they believed were friendly diplomatic conversations. They described their shield technology, their weapon ranges, and even their standard battle formations, never imagining that the humans were creating a complete catalog of every vulnerability. They revealed Captain Hyjin maintained her friendly diplomatic smile while mentally noting how the alien commander kept bragging about victories against species that had possessed no real military technology. The Vorthak had never faced an enemy that could match their firepower or outwit their simple tactics. They had become lazy and overconfident. After centuries of easy wins against primitive civilizations, the human ships continued to maintain their peaceful appearance while the aliens conducted their detailed scans. The Vorthak sensors detected nothing more threatening than basic navigation systems and simple communication arrays. The humans had become masters at hiding their true capabilities behind false hull plating and disguised equipment. Their most powerful weapons appeared to be nothing more than scientific instruments or maintenance tools. Admiral Taman reviewed the intelligence reports flowing in from every human vessel in the area. The aliens had positioned themselves in textbook formations that would have been effective against the weak opponents they usually faced. However, these same formations left them completely exposed to the kind of coordinated attack that human military doctrine had perfected over many years of preparation. The Vorthak fleet began moving into what they clearly believed were intimidating positions around the outer edges of the solar system. Their ships spread out in a wide net designed to prevent any human vessels from escaping to warn other systems about the invasion. Each alien captain seemed proud of their role in this grand demonstration of Vorthak power. Commander Daehyun watched the alien movements with the calm patience of a predator observing its prey. The Vorthak were following exactly the same patterns they had used in their previous conquests, making themselves predictable and vulnerable. Their commander was so focused on creating an impressive display that he had forgotten the basic principles of military tactics. The human crew members went about their duties with quiet efficiency while maintaining the appearance of nervous civilians who had never experienced anything like this encounter. The aliens saw exactly what they expected to see: a peaceful species that was clearly outmatched, and would soon realize the futility of resistance. What the Vorthak could not see were the hidden weapon systems that were slowly powering up beneath false hull sections. The fusion reactors that appeared to be simple power generators were actually military-grade systems capable of supplying energy to weapons that could crack planets. The humans had spent decades perfecting the art of appearing harmless while remaining deadly. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the balance of power across the entire galaxy. The Vorthak believed they were about to add another easy conquest to their empire, while the humans prepared to teach them a lesson about the dangers of underestimating a species that had learned to hide its true strength behind a mask of peaceful civilization. The peaceful facade was about to fall away and reveal the reality of human military preparation. The galaxy would soon learn that the most dangerous opponents were often those who appeared weakest until the moment they chose to show their true power. The Vorthak Emperor Gornathax sat on his golden throne aboard the massive flagship, reviewing intelligence reports about humanity with growing satisfaction. His scouts had been observing human settlements for many months, and their findings painted a picture of a species that would be easy to conquer. The humans seemed to spend most of their time on entertainment sports and artistic pursuits rather than preparing for war. General Thrakos stood beside the Emperor holding a data tablet filled with detailed observations of human behavior. The aliens had watched human cities through their advanced surveillance equipment and had seen no signs of military training or weapon manufacturing. Instead, they observed humans playing games in large stadiums, celebrating festivals with colorful parades, and creating beautiful works of art in peaceful studios. The Emperor laughed as he read reports about human conflicts that seemed to involve nothing more than heated debates in government buildings. The Vorthak had never witnessed any evidence of large-scale human warfare, and they interpreted this as proof that humans were natural pacifists who had never learned the art of real combat. Their analysts concluded that humanity represented no military threat whatsoever. What the aliens did not understand was that humanity had simply evolved beyond fighting among themselves. After learning about the countless dangers that lurked throughout the galaxy, the cooperation they observed was not weakness, but rather a sign of advanced civilization that had learned to work together. Against external threats, the humans had redirected their warrior instincts toward preparing for encounters with hostile alien species. Captain Eugene of the UES Serenity received her orders to escort the Vorthak delegation toward Earth while maintaining the careful illusion of human helplessness. Her ship had been specially modified to appear even more primitive than usual, with fake rust stains on the hull and deliberately outdated communication equipment. The aliens would see exactly what they expected to see: a backward species using inferior technology. The Vorthak marveled at how crude human engineering appeared compared to their own advanced systems. They observed the human ship struggling to maintain formation and assumed this was evidence of mechanical problems rather than deliberate deception. The aliens felt a mixture of pity and contempt for a species that seemed so far behind their own technological achievements. During the journey toward Earth, the Vorthak delegation engaged in long conversations with their human escorts, asking detailed questions about human society and military capabilities. Ambassador Su Young played her role perfectly, appearing nervous and overwhelmed by the alien presence. She stumbled over her words when discussing human defenses and seemed genuinely frightened by the impressive alien technology. The aliens enjoyed demonstrating their superiority by showing off their advanced weapons and defensive systems. They explained how their energy shields could deflect any attack and how their plasma cannons could vaporize entire cities with a single shot. The Vorthak never realized they were providing a complete briefing on their own weaknesses to an enemy that was taking careful notes. General Thrakos conducted detailed scans of every human vessel they encountered and found nothing more threatening than basic navigation equipment and simple communication systems. The human ships appeared to be held together with primitive welding and outdated computer systems that would have been considered obsolete centuries ago by Vorthak standards. The alien military analysts studied human settlement patterns and concluded that humans had no understanding of strategic defense planning. Their cities were built for convenience and beauty rather than military necessity, with no obvious fortifications or weapon emplacements. The aliens saw parks and schools and shopping centers, but no signs of the massive military infrastructure that would be necessary to resist an invasion. Captain Eugene listened carefully as the alien officers discussed their battle plans, assuming that the humans could not understand their language. The Vorthak had developed a simple strategy that involved surrounding Earth with their fleet and demanding surrender while demonstrating their firepower by destroying a few unimportant targets. The aliens expected the entire conquest to be completed within a few hours. The human captain made careful mental notes about Vorthak tactical doctrines and command structures while maintaining her act of confused cooperation. The aliens revealed their communication frequencies, their command hierarchy, and even their standard operating procedures for accepting surrender from conquered species. They treated the humans as harmless primitives who posed no threat to their security. Admiral Taman received regular updates from all human vessels in the area and was amazed by how much intelligence the aliens were voluntarily providing. The Vorthak seemed eager to explain their military capabilities to anyone who would listen, apparently believing that fear would make their enemies more cooperative. The aliens had grown so accustomed to easy victories that they had forgotten the importance of operational security. The Vorthak fleet began positioning themselves around the solar system in formations that looked impressive but were tactically unsound. Their ships spread out in wide ceremonial patterns designed to create maximum visual impact rather than strategic advantage. The aliens treated the deployment like a parade rather than a military. Operation Commander J1 observed the alien movements from his hidden monitoring station and was struck by how predictable their tactics had become. The Vorthak were following the same patterns they had used in dozens of previous conquests, making no effort to adapt their strategy to account for different types of opponents. The aliens had become lazy and overconfident after centuries of facing only weak resistance. The human fleet maintained their disguises, while secretly preparing for combat. That everyone knew was coming, the false hull plating remained in place, hiding massive weapon arrays that could have destroyed the entire Vorthak fleet within minutes. The fusion reactors continued operating at minimal power levels while remaining ready to surge to full combat capacity at a moment's notice. Lieutenant Minho continued monitoring alien communications and discovered that the Vorthak had already begun planning victory celebrations. They had prepared speeches about the glorious conquest of humanity and had even started dividing up human territory among their various noble houses. The aliens were so confident in their inevitable success that they had stopped paying attention to potential threats. The Vorthak delegation sent regular reports back to their homeworlds, describing the pathetic state of human civilization and assuring their leaders that the conquest would proceed exactly as the aliens painted a picture of a species that had never experienced real warfare and would collapse immediately when faced with superior force. Emperor Gornathax reviewed the final intelligence reports and declared himself satisfied with the preparations for conquest. He had seen enough evidence to convince him that humanity represented no challenge to Vorthak military might. The Emperor issued orders for the fleet to begin the final phase of their operation, confident that victory was assured. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter alien assumptions about human capabilities. The Vorthak had convinced themselves that they faced nothing more than frightened primitives who would surrender without a fight. They had no idea that they were about to encounter a species that had spent generations preparing for exactly this type of encounter. The underestimation was complete, and the aliens had fallen perfectly into the trap that humanity had prepared for them. The galaxy was about to witness a demonstration of what happened when overconfident predators encountered prey that had learned to fight back. General Thrakos stared at the tactical displays showing the transformed human fleet and felt his pride as a military commander override his growing fear. The alien general had spent his entire career conquering weaker species and could not accept that his forces might be outmatched by primitive humans. He ordered his ships to attack, believing that Vorthak military superiority would somehow overcome what appeared to be impossible odds. The Vorthak fleet opened fire with their energy weapons, sending brilliant beams of destructive force toward the human vessels. The aliens had used these same weapons to destroy the defenses of dozens of other civilizations, and they expected to see human ships exploding in spectacular displays of fire and debris. Instead, they watched their attacks strike human shields that absorbed the energy effortlessly. Captain Hyjin observed the alien weapon impacts on her tactical display and noted that the Vorthak attacks were barely registering on their defensive systems. The human shields had been designed to withstand forces far greater than anything the aliens could generate, having been built by a species that understood the true scale of galactic warfare. The alien weapons were like throwing pebbles at a fortress wall. The Vorthak continued their bombardment for several minutes, pouring every bit of firepower they possessed into their attacks against the human fleet. Their weapons heated up from continuous firing, and their energy reserves began dropping rapidly as they maintained maximum output. The aliens grew increasingly desperate as they realized their most powerful weapons were having no effect whatsoever. Emperor Gornathax watched the battle from his flagship and demanded to know why his forces were not achieving the quick victory he had expected. His weapons officers reported that their attacks were reaching their targets, but somehow the human ships were completely unharmed. The alien emperor began to understand that he was facing technology that was far beyond anything his empire had ever encountered. Commander Yujin decided that the aliens had been given enough time to demonstrate their capabilities, and it was time for humanity to respond. She ordered a single warning shot to be fired at the alien flagship using the smallest plasma cannon in their arsenal. The weapon was designed for precision rather than destruction and would serve as a perfect demonstration of human restraint. The human plasma Cannon fired once, sending a beam of concentrated energy that sliced through the Vorthek Emperor's shields like they were made of paper. The shot was precisely calibrated to disable the alien flagship's primary weapon systems without destroying the vessel or killing the crew. The beam cut through advanced alien defenses that had protected the ship for decades. The alien fleet watched in stunned silence as their most powerful vessel was crippled by a single shot from what they had believed was a simple transport ship. The humans had effortlessly penetrated defenses that had been considered impregnable by every military expert in the Vorthek Empire. The aliens realized they were facing weapons technology that was generations ahead of their own. General Fracos received damage reports from the flagship and could barely comprehend what had happened. The human weapon had surgically removed his Emperor's ability to fight back while leaving life support and basic systems intact. The precision required for such an attack demonstrated a level of military sophistication that the aliens had never imagined possible. The human shot had been a masterpiece of controlled destruction that showed both overwhelming power and remarkable restraint. The aliens understood that the humans could have easily destroyed the flagship completely, but had chosen to disable rather than kill. The message was clear: humanity possessed devastating weapons but preferred to use them responsibly. Captain J1 opened communications with the alien fleet and spoke in the same professional tone that had characterized all human interactions during this encounter. He explained that the warning shot had been fired using their smallest weapon system, and that the human fleet possessed armaments that were far more destructive. The alien crews listened in growing terror as they realized the full scope of what they were facing. The human commander offered the Vorthek fleet a choice between peaceful withdrawal and experiencing the full capabilities of human military technology. He made it clear that humanity preferred to avoid unnecessary bloodshed but was prepared to defend their independence by any means necessary. The aliens were given exactly 1 hour to make their decision. Emperor Gornathax tried to maintain his composure while his advisors argued frantically about their options. Some called for continued attack, believing that Vorthek honor demanded they fight to the death rather than retreat. Others demanded immediate surrender, recognizing that further resistance would only result in the complete destruction of their forces. The alien emperor realized that every assumption his empire had made about military superiority had been shattered by a species they had dismissed as primitive and weak. The humans had demonstrated that they possessed both the capability and the wisdom to use overwhelming force responsibly. The Vorthek were learning what it meant to face an enemy that was both stronger and more civilized than themselves. Admiral Taemin monitored the alien communications and could hear the panic in their voices as they struggled to comprehend their situation. The Vorthek had never encountered an enemy that could match their firepower, let alone exceed it by such a massive margin. The aliens were discovering that the galaxy contained species far more advanced than they had ever imagined. The human fleet maintained their positions while waiting for the alien response. Every weapon system locked onto Vorthek targets and ready to fire at a moment's notice. The aliens could see the tactical displays showing exactly how outmatched they were with human weapons capable of destroying their entire fleet before they could mount any effective counterattack. Lieutenant Minho listened to the increasingly desperate communications between Vorthek ships as their crews realized the hopelessness of their situation. The aliens were learning that military conquest was not simply a matter of having bigger ships and more impressive uniforms. Real warfare required technological superiority, tactical intelligence, and strategic planning. The demonstration had achieved its purpose, showing the aliens that humanity was not the weak, primitive species they had expected to conquer. The humans had revealed just enough of their capabilities to prove their overwhelming superiority, while maintaining the option to use even more devastating weapons if necessary. The galaxy was about to witness the first time in centuries that the Vorthek Empire had been forced to retreat. The alien fleet began powering down their weapon systems as the reality of their situation became impossible to ignore. The Vorthek were facing an enemy that could destroy them effortlessly, but was offering them the chance to leave with their lives. The choice between continued resistance and survival had become obvious to everyone except the most stubborn alien commanders. The Hour was ticking away, and the aliens had to decide whether their pride was worth the complete destruction of their invasion force. The humans waited patiently while the Vortex struggled with the humiliation of defeat and the wisdom of retreat. The galaxy held its breath as one of its most powerful empires faced its first real military challenge in centuries. In the months following the Vorthak retreat, the galaxy buzzed with rumors and speculation about human military capabilities. Ambassador Su Yung found herself overwhelmed with communication requests from dozens of alien species seeking to establish friendly relations with humanity. The diplomatic isolation that had once protected human space was replaced by eager offers of trade, agreements, and mutual defense pacts. The story of the human victory had spread throughout the galactic community, with each retelling adding new details about the incredible weapons and tactical brilliance that had defeated the mighty Vorthak Empire. Some species spoke of human ships that could destroy entire star systems, while others described tactical maneuvers that had confused and outmaneuvered the alien fleet captain. Day Hyen noticed the dramatic change in alien behavior during his regular patrol duties. Ships that had once approached human vessels with casual indifference now maintained respectful distances and transmitted polite greeting messages. The false reputation of human weakness had been completely replaced by genuine recognition of human military power. The Vorthak Empire continued to struggle with internal problems as their defeat became common knowledge throughout their territory. Subject species that had been oppressed for generations seized the opportunity to assert their independence, knowing that Vorthak military power was no longer absolute. The empire that had once seemed invincible was now facing rebellions on dozens of worlds. Emperor Gornathax found himself fighting for political survival as noble houses within his empire began questioning his leadership. The alien emperor had built his power on a reputation of military invincibility that had been shattered by his encounter with humanity. His advisors whispered about replacement while his enemies prepared to take advantage of his weakness. General Thrakos faced a military tribunal investigating his role in the disastrous encounter with humanity. The alien general tried to explain that his forces had followed standard procedures and that no intelligence had suggested the humans possessed such advanced technology. The tribunal was more interested in finding someone to blame than understanding how their intelligence had been so completely wrong. The galactic political landscape shifted as civilizations that had previously aligned themselves with the Vorthak Empire began seeking new alliances. Species that had paid tribute to avoid conquest suddenly found themselves free to make their own choices about trade and diplomacy. The old order based on Vorthak military dominance was crumbling. Admiral Taemin established new protocols for handling the flood of diplomatic requests arriving from across the galaxy. The human military leadership had to quickly adapt to their new role as a recognized galactic power while maintaining their preference for peaceful solutions. The humans were learning that great power brought great responsibility. Lieutenant Minho found himself assigned to a new intelligence division tasked with monitoring galactic political developments. The young officer discovered that the human victory had inspired resistance movements throughout Vorthak space and had encouraged other species to stand up against various forms of oppression. The galaxy was becoming more unstable but also more free. The human fleet continued to maintain their peaceful appearance while remaining ready for any future threats. Captain Yujin received orders to participate in joint training exercises with newly allied species that wanted to learn human tactical doctrines. The humans were becoming teachers rather than students in the art of galactic warfare. Captain Hyjin commanded one of the first human vessels to visit former Vorthak territories, where she witnessed the celebrations of newly liberated worlds. The alien populations treated human crews as heroes and liberators. Even though the humans had never intended to start a galactic revolution, their victory had achieved far more than they had expected. The economic implications of the changing galactic order became apparent as trade routes shifted and new commercial opportunities emerged. Species that had been isolated under Vorthak rule suddenly gained access to galactic markets, while others found their monopolies challenged by increased competition. Commander J1 established the first permanent human diplomatic station in neutral space, where Representatives from various species could meet to discuss mutual interests. The humans found themselves serving as mediators in conflicts between species that had previously been too weak to resist Vorthek. Domination. The Vorthek military underwent massive restructuring as their leadership tried to adapt to the new reality of facing opponents who could match their firepower. The aliens were forced to develop new tactical doctrines and invest in advanced technology to remain competitive in a galaxy where they were no longer the dominant force. Captain Soo-young led the first human diplomatic mission to the Vorthak homeworld, where she met with moderate faction leaders who wanted to establish peaceful relations. The former enemies discovered they had much in common and began working together to prevent future conflicts between their species. The galaxy witnessed the emergence of new alliances as species that had been enemies under Vorthak rule found common ground in their shared desire for independence. Former subject worlds began forming confederations for mutual defense. While maintaining their individual cultural identities, young alien cadets began studying human military tactics in their academies, while human officers found themselves invited to lecture at prestigious alien institutions. The exchange of knowledge and ideas was creating a new generation of military leaders who understood that cooperation was more effective than conquest. The human victory had demonstrated that military technology was not enough to guarantee success, and that tactical intelligence, strategic planning, and moral authority were equally important. The galaxy was learning that true strength came from the combination of capability and wisdom rather than raw firepower alone. Pirates and raiders, who had once targeted human vessels, now sought easier prey among species that had not demonstrated such overwhelming defensive capabilities. The criminal elements of the galaxy quickly learned to avoid human space while focusing their attention on worlds that lacked effective protection. The legacy of the human victory continued to influence galactic politics as new conflicts arose and were resolved through negotiation rather than conquest. The example of human restraint had shown other species that military power could be used responsibly, and that victory did not require the destruction of one's enemies. Years later, when historians studied the transformation of galactic civilization, they would mark the day of the Vorthak retreat as the beginning of a new era. The humans had proven that a species could be both powerful and peaceful, setting an example that would influence interstellar relations for generations to come. The galaxy had indeed trembled when aliens learned that human warships were ready for war, but more importantly, it had learned that humans were ready for peace when treated with respect and dignity. The balance between strength and restraint had established humanity's place among the stars and created a foundation for a more just and stable galactic order. The story of humanity's emergence as a galactic power became legend, teaching other species that appearances could be deceiving, and that the most dangerous opponents were often those who appeared harmless until threatened. The galaxy would never again make the mistake of underestimating a species based on their peaceful appearance, and the new order would be built on mutual respect rather than fear and conquest.